I keep coming back to this stat because I can't quite wrap my head around it. We are living in what's probably the most sex forward, sexually liberated culture in human history. And yet we're having less sex than any generation before us. Not a little less, dramatically less. And it's not just about sex, it's significantly fewer relationships, fewer people living together, and ultimately, fewer babies. These are big shifts, which feels like a pretty big deal when you zoom out and think about what that leads to. Because if we're not pairing up the same way, if we're not reproducing at the same rates, what does that actually mean for the future? Not in some abstract society will change way, but in a very real, who's here in 50 years kind of way. I don't know if this is something we should be deeply concerned about or if this is just the natural evolution of how humans live now. But I do know it feels like we're in the middle of a shift that I don't think we fully understand it yet.
What's interesting to me is it doesn't feel like people have stopped wanting connection or have even stopped wanting kids. I'm 38. I want to be a mom someday. That hasn't changed. But the path to getting there, it feels a lot less clear than it used to. And there are moments when that's really encouraging. There are so many women out there saying, "You're not behind. You're exactly where you need to be." And then there are other moments where it's like, "Yeah, but the clock is still ticking." And while all of that is happening culturally, people are getting more creative. You guys, we have apps now, and I'm not talking like dating apps. These are apps for finding someone to have a child with, not romance, not a traditional relationship. Just, do we share values? Do we both want to be parents? Cool. Let's build something platonic together. And that stopped me in my tracks because it says something really big. People haven't given up on family. They've just stopped believing that the traditional path is the only way to get there. And I think that that's where this gets really fascinating and maybe even a little emotional for me.
That's the part that really stands out to me because it wasn't always this complicated. There certainly was a time I didn't want kids. I was just going to be the best aunt. I'm married later than most of my friends. I had Callie in my late 20s, Cole in my early 30s. And at the time, I was behind most of my friends who were already married, already having kids, already building their family. But then I watched a lot of those same friends go through really hard things, divorces, instability. And I realized later that the foundation that Tom and I had built, even though it came a little later, mattered more than the timing. I can also say that I don't know that you can ever afford having kids. If that had been our focus, we wouldn't have this podcast. And now I look at your generation and it's almost the opposite problem. It's not just, do I want kids? It's, can I afford it? Is this the right partner? What if this doesn't work? What if I wait too long? What if I don't wait long enough? It's this constant calculation. And what strikes me most is how heavy that decision has become. For my generation, and definitely my parents, having kids was often just what you did. You didn't analyze it from every angle. You didn't run the numbers. You just stepped into it. Now it feels like one of the biggest, most expensive, most life-altering decisions a person can make. And it lasts forever. And a lot of people are either pushing it further and further down the road or deciding not to do it at all. And I keep wondering, not just what that means for the numbers, but what that feels like for the people living it.
So today we're getting into all of it: the data, the cultural shifts, the emotional weight, and the question bubbling up underneath all of it. What happens to society when having a baby starts to feel less like a given and more like a luxury? Welcome to Two Millennials and Mom.
I'm Callie.
I'm Cole.
And I'm Mom.
So let's dive right into some of that data because I think that that is where this starts getting kind of scary, interesting for sure. So the average age of the first-time mother in the United States has risen from 26.6 in 2016 to 27.5 in 2023. The overall average of all births has climbed to nearly 30 years old for the first time in history, ever. Now, teen birth rates have dropped 79% from their peak in 1991. And in a lot of ways, that's considered a success, which is great. Then you've got women who are 40 to 44. Those birth rates in that age range has increased by more than 132% since 1990. Women 35 to 39, those birth rates are up by 67%. The U.S. total fertility rate hit a record low of 1.62 in 2023, well below the 2.1 that was needed to replace the current population as they're aging out. Now, this is kind of interesting too. Urban women have their first child at an average of 28 and a half, whereas rural women have an age range of about 24.8. So I think it's interesting how geography shapes that timeline. So if you're raising a young child today, the annual cost for that child is about $30,000. And that statistic or that number alone is up 36% in the last 3 years. Over the course of a life for an 18-year-old, for the first 18 years of that life of this child, you're spending about $300,000 on that kid. And in some states, it's even higher than that. So I'm
That math
curious.
doesn't check for me.
I
18
thought the
years at
same.
$30,000 a year is closer to 600,000, 580.
It isn't exactly $30,000 a year because think about it. You have lots of um, what is that called? Daycare
Initial
costs.
expenses,
Yes.
daycare.
And so it's not $30,000 per year. It just isn't.
I don't know. I feel like I ate a lot. Mom, did I get cheaper the older I got?
No.
I didn't think so.
But some of that is offset too.
Okay. But so tell me what your gut reaction is to that.
I think for me, I'm kind of excited
Because,
because it's not too late, because
okay.
there's still time.
Okay. Boo.
I still have time.
I mean, as someone who doesn't particularly want kids, like for me, it's more curiosity. What does this lead to? Kind of like we talked about a few minutes ago. It really is concerning that the cost of raising a kid has increased so rapidly in such a short time frame. I mean, Mom, if you had the ballpark, how much do you think it cost to raise Callie or myself?
Oh gosh, I have no idea. I mean, we did pretty inexpensive daycare. Callie wasn't really in daycare. She did after school kind of stuff. You were in daycare, but even at that, there was a point where we lost our provider and you went to your grandparents and they kept you until you were about 5 years old before you went to school. So I think we got out of it pretty cheap. I mean, we did have two boys who ate around the clock. And honestly, I'm not sure that has changed very much.
True.
Even with you not living here. And y'all were, I mean, y'all were different about college and how we expensed that out. So I think ours was relatively quote unquote inexpensive. It didn't seem inexpensive at the time. You're just trying to make ends meet at the time. I mean, but
Yeah.
we both had jobs and we had family around to
Yeah.
help.
So, sort of related and also unrelated question. Could you have done it on one income?
Could
Not
you
at
have done
all.
it without family around?
Yes, it would have been a whole lot harder. And I cannot even fathom being a single mom and trying to do it. I mean, your dad and I got involved when we were in church with a singles group, and I think I learned so much from those women who were raising children alone that, I mean, there will never be a time that my heart does not go out to them, that I won't do what I possibly can to help a single mom along the way, because I can't fathom how hard it was to raise a kid by themselves. And generally not one. Generally they had, 2.5.
So, Mom, you mentioned in the intro feeling behind in your late 20s, early 30s when you had us. I'm curious as to if you think that waiting longer to have kids is actually a good thing.
I do think it was a good thing. I think getting married later was good. I mean, there's a huge difference between an 18-year-old getting married and a 25, 6-year-old getting married. I had been out on my own. You know, I'd had my own apartment. I had my own job. I was managing, myself. That's just exponential knowledge. When you go from your dad's house to your husband's house and you don't have any knowledge of what it takes to survive, you're growing up together. If you're young like that, you're trying to turn into an adult together. And sometimes that works really well, and sometimes that's disastrous.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So to kind of back up a little bit here, but in a similar vein, do you think that drop in teen pregnancy and the rise of delayed motherhood are connected, or do you think those are different phenomena?
I think, and you guys can totally disagree with me, but I think that there is a ton of fear and harshness that was instilled in my generation. I'm thinking of the line in Mean Girls where the coach, somebody says, if you have sex, you will get pregnant and you will die. And
Oh,
it's a joke, right? But it's kind of not at the same time. Like they're trying to scare you out of having sex and doing things and exploring any of that. I'm also thinking about MTV had that show that was wildly popular for years and years and years about teen moms. And there was, I was never a huge fan. Couldn't name any of the people on there, but I think that there was also some, again, fear that instilled. I don't want to be like those girls. I didn't look at it and say, oh, they're so popular. Now they're famous. I was like, whoa, that sounds awful. And so I think
hard
that there was
life.
a lot
I
of
really
fear.
don't want to say this, but maybe this is an instance of reality TV instilling a little bit of wisdom into a generation.
I
And
know.
I mean,
Crediting MTV with that.
maybe it's a healthy fear, but I, I mean, I think there may be some merit to that.
I also think that because we had such access to so much information and so much knowledge, we saw things like STDs and AIDS in a different light. We were past for the most part, at least for my age group, we were past the stigma of that being leprosy or some kind of death sentence. Anybody who has AIDS you can't come anywhere close to them. You can't touch them. And I think that again also instilled some fear. I was coming up in the time of the HPV virus and vaccine. And if you had a little girl, this was a big discussion. You as parents had to have conversations with your doctors to say, hey, this is why you should or shouldn't do this for your daughter. And I think that just added a layer of, holy shit, the world is really scary. I can't touch anybody, and because I will get pregnant and I will die.
That's kind of funny to me because I think the information, especially preceding my generation, was so like, oh, if he touches me, I'll get pregnant. And they just had so little real information. It was all behind the scenes.
Propaganda.
Hyperbole.
Mm-hmm, that didn't have any reality to it or not a lot of reality to it. And then you're talking about having almost too much reality.
I'm thinking of Jen Hatmaker's book Awake, where she's talking about she grew up in a very almost culty church scenario where a girl is the equivalent of a rose, a beautiful flower, and you need to maintain your flower all the time. And if you don't, then on your wedding day, when you finally do decide to get married to your one true love, you're ruined. You are just a stick because all of the petals have been pulled off and you're just this horrible, decrepit woman. And I think that stuff like that was very, especially as a girl, was very prevalent. It was weird.
You know, I've heard some kind of similar arguments from I don't really want to say both sides of the aisle because I don't really want this to be super political, but from a relatively modern liberal perspective and a relatively modern conservative perspective that kind of seem to be arguing for the same thing but for different angles. I'm thinking of like I think it was Scott Galloway who talks about like go out, get drunk, fool around because you have to do that to be able to learn. And if you do that with a specific person, you're learning and building that relationship together. And I've heard a very similar argument from a much more conservative perspective of getting married young, both being virgins. And if one like and the argument that she made was like if one person has had a lot of sex and one person hasn't had a lot of sex, that makes that relationship so much harder because they're like on different levels. Whereas if you're getting married young and you're both virgins, you're learning about sexuality, your own bodies together, and that makes it easier for that more powerful bond to form. And like I think that there's probably some merit to that on a certain level. It's just I don't know how much.
Yeah,
I think that depends on the people and
Sure.
their willingness to learn together.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
I agree with that. I mean, I
I
think
can
that
see it being disastrous in some cases and beneficial in others.
Yeah.
kind of the other side of that coin that also kind of makes sense to me is you're not going to buy a car to drive every day without test driving it, without sitting in it. And that sounds so skanky and I'm sorry, mom, but I think that there's some merit to that as well. And I don't think that that has to only be in the bedroom in a sexual romantic fashion. I think that there's that old adage of when people tell you, I think it was who is it that says that? Maya Angelou, I believe. When people tell you who they are, believe them. Then feeling them out, not physically, but feeling them out to say, hey, how do you? I saw something the other day. It says, I will test your potential partner with slow internet because however they deal with that is how they'll handle all of these things in your relationship. And that it made me laugh. Like I giggled at that. But at the same time, I'm like, oh, well, I mean, there's some truth to that. If you can't handle slow internet for 15 minutes, how are you going to handle a cancer diagnosis, a child getting injured or dying, God forbid? I mean, I think that there's some merit to that little bit of a test drive as well.
And I think the perspectives have changed. I mean, prior to my generation, a girl was expected to get married and that was her job, really. You need to get married and you're supposed to keep the house and have the children and manage all of this, but you had no authority. You had very little
Autonomy.
ownership in anything. So I, I think that has just really changed. And I'm thankful for those changes that today a woman, that's not the only worth that she has. There's much more to being a female today and, and knowing that, well, you can't be president in the United States and be female, but maybe you can be a CEO of some corporations and you can
There are
be a
more
scientist if
options.
you want to, or an airplane pilot if you want to. So there's a huge difference in perspective that has come along with that I hope has also influenced our look on sex and how that what it means. And I kind of asked y'all this question yesterday. It's almost when you talk to me about there being less sex, I have to question, is it because we found out that it has some meaning in the right places, in the right circumstances, and that we're just not that interested in it just for the,
Sake of
just
it.
for sex benefit? And I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, I think it's more superficial than that. I think we don't like each
Still,
other. Yeah. I think we like each other less than we ever have. So to kind of talk about that, the paradox of this conversation that we kind of brought up in our intros, We have never had a more sex forward, sex permissive society, historically speaking. And yet the data says we're having less sex than ever. In 1990,
Yeah.
55% of American adults reported having sex weekly. By 2024, that number had dropped to 37.
That blows my mind. It makes me really sad for people.
Yeah. So among adults ages 18 to 29, the share reporting zero sex in the past year doubled from 12% in 2010 to 24% in 2024. 1 in 4 young adults has not had sex in the last year. Nearly 1 in 3 men ages 18 to 24 reported no sexual activity in the past year, with Gen Z being the least sexually active young adult cohort in modern recorded history. It is mirrored in Australia, Germany, the UK, and Japan, so it's not just in the US. And there are fewer people living with partners. The share of 18 to 29-year-olds living with a partner, married or not, dropped from 42% to 32% from 2014 to 2024,
That
which is
does
just,
surprise me.
yeah,
I think, and this is just a tiny tangent, and I won't get off onto it too far, but I think that that also goes to show the housing crisis that we're experiencing, especially in this country. You have all of these big, huge houses that don't make any sense, especially financially for one person, even for two people. And so I think that that shows here a little bit more than it has historically, just because you don't have starter homes. You don't have a 900 square foot home or a 1,200 square foot home every other house. You have 3,000 plus square foot homes. Like that has changed dramatically since the 1950s when you had single family homes.
yeah. I have only anecdotal evidence, but I'm speaking from personal experience. Sometimes y'all are hard to live with. Um,
Hey
I
now.
hear
Back at
me
you,
out.
dude.
And again, this is a a single piece of evidence and is extremely anecdotal, but there was a time where I was living with one of my girlfriends, and the reason, to my understanding, that we broke up, I get not the only thing, but when we started living together, she had several roommates. And then in a very short period of time, all of those roommates left. So she could no longer afford that place by herself. I had plenty of disposable income at the time and offered to step in and take on half of the responsibility. And that action alone caused such a rift in our relationship because she had to be a girl boss. She had to do it by herself and couldn't accept help from me.
Oh, that's
Wow.
interesting.
Do you think that that aspect of changing your relationship from being more romantic, from being a team to being more transactional really played such a pivotal role in her her feelings in those moments?
I don't know why, but yes, because it wasn't transactional for me. It was,
Right.
this is just what needs to be done. But because she couldn't do it by herself, now I was the
Interesting.
patriarchy, I guess.
Yeah.
I think that's so amazing because if you think about marriage, that's what has to happen. That's
Yeah.
what you anticipate to happen today is that
That's
you're
one of the
going to have
benefits.
yeah, exactly. You're going to have combined income.
Yeah.
Everybody's going to contribute their part.
Working towards
And
a shared goal.
yeah, so it's a little odd to me that that changed things.
And
But
But
maybe I'm wrong,
also,
but that's certainly what it
no,
felt like at the
I don't
time.
think you're wrong. I think it is hard to live with people and I think I see more people who are living together who don't like who they're living with than I see of people living together who do like each other.
well, and I also think, we've talked about this before. There are so many fads and trends that we live in a constant pendulum, right? And so we went so far to one side that said, girl bosses are the way to be. You need to be a CEO. You need to be the breadwinner. You have to be the feminist, the perfect feminist, and you have to be the strong one and down with the patriarchy. And like individually, none of those things are bad or wrong. But at the same time, when it's all that you can see and it's what you choose to put out on everybody else who can't necessarily be those things or doesn't need to be those things, you're emasculating people. You're
Everyone.
trivializing people. Yeah. It becomes incredibly condescending to especially the men in your life, especially your partners who are trying to build something communally with you, and you're the only one who's allowed to take those reins.
That's pretty wild. But
Yeah.
Cole, I don't disagree with you that sometimes people are hard to live with.
I get it. I know I am.
I was going to say, I think you might want to reword that. It's not that y'all, it's not Callie and Mecca are hard to live with. It's
I
that
didn't say
other
Callie and
people.
Mecca. I said people.
He said y'all are hard to live with. And I
Um,
took it as Callie and Mecca. And I was like, I didn't think I was bad.
he didn't mean it as you and I.
Right.
I meant
Women,
men
some
and
women are
women,
difficult.
Yes.
we
Yeah.
speak different languages. Y'all
Yes.
fall
For
into
sure.
that category some days.
Yeah.
Yes, that's true. So
I
do
know
y'all,
I do
for the
too.
record.
I started to say, buddy, it's not just us speaking the wrong language, but yes,
Mars and Venus.
I'm
Mars and
thinking
Venus.
of whatever that girl's name was who wrote that book, Girl, Wash Your Face. And I mean, just the exacerbation of you have to be all of these things as a woman.
Why can't you just be you?
Yeah.
One of the things is that I'm hearing both of you verbalize but not say directly is listening to the hype and not just accepting who you are and who that person is that you care about. Having this image in your mind of what you're supposed to be. And don't get me wrong, I grew up with one of those images too, but I didn't have all of the social media and all of that inundation that I think you guys have today that just pounds it into you that you're just not quite good enough.
You know, there's a whole thing called the Great Rewiring. It is talking about the smartphone proliferation between 2012 and 2015. And that specific stage of time aligns almost exactly with the inflection point where these measures begin to decline, where the genders begin to be very off balanced and very askew from perspectives within each other, and you're all of one or all of the other. There is very little give and take. And that part I think is really interesting to kind of dig into and look at.
I think it's very valid.
So,
Scary.
is this a technology issue? Is this a culture issue or an economic story? Or is it all of them?
I think it's less economic than cultural. I do. I think that culturally we're just beating ourselves up. You cannot be, I mean, even if you were an influencer with tons of followers, you know on the backside that what you're presenting isn't always truthful. And that's got to be difficult to live with.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a little bit of all of them because there are good relationships that don't have children or aren't having more children because it's an economic factor, because they can afford it.
Oh,
I
I would
mean,
agree.
I know couples that are in debt up to their necks that have good paying jobs that will be in debt for the rest of their lives. And so they've decided we can't have kids.
That choice was made for them by that debt. I do think that technology plays a role in it. I
Sure.
think that, again, that access to other opinions, that my truth means it is true kind of mentality, I think plays into all of this. I'm thinking about, I am not sitting here trying to body shame anybody or trying to say any of that, but I think we had a big, huge campaign for being really proud of who you are. And I think that that kind of on the pendulum again went really far, probably too far in one way. And so I think you're allowed to be weird. If you like Pokemon or you like Dungeons and Dragons or you like Gossip Girl or Monopoly, whatever it is, I think you can like anything. But I think that we have gone so far as to say, I like this and every other person has to like it or they're wrong or they're dumb or they're not worthy. And I think that we have taken that personality, that individualism, and isolated ourselves with it. Instead of making everybody more accepting, it isolated us as individuals to say, I'm the only one who feels like this. I'm the only one who's good enough. I'm the only one who's acceptable. I'm the only one who has good taste. And I think that you can apply that to pretty much any opinion that's out there. I'm the only one who voted for the right president and you're wrong. I'm the only one who is thinking about this from a rational standpoint and you're wrong. And I think that that makes having a relationship with another human being nearly impossible.
I
Yeah.
think if you couple that with, and Cole, you've talked about this before, where you couple that with this mindset that you have, this list that you have that the other person has to meet. I mean, I have to laugh when I hear somebody say, oh, I want somebody who does this and X and Y and, their hair is this color and they're this tall and their toes are all straight. I just have to laugh because, I mean, honestly, those people aren't out there.
That's exactly what I was about to say. There's this like common conception that many modern women follow this rule of sixes, 6 foot tall, 6 figures, 6 inches. And if your pool of potential partners has to meet all of those criteria and you start accounting for all of the men that are already married or in relationships, you're looking at like a virtual impossibility of finding a partner.
Less than 1%. But, I've also seen this and we've laughed about it, but from the male side, also coming in with some of those things of you can't steal my hoodie or you can't eat from my plate. And I'm thinking, what difference does any of that make? I mean, in the long scheme of things, in a relationship that you're going to enjoy, who really gives a crap about that stuff? But if that's what your demand is,
Metric. Uh-huh.
yes, if that's a great word. If that's your metric, you've just eliminated
A huge
so,
swath of people.
yes. And, and it also means that you have a very narrow, I don't know that I even want to be friends with you if your mind is so narrow that you can't accommodate or roll with the punches. Because like you said, Callie, what happens when something really bad happens? When serious grief hits you or some financial instability comes up and you're
Everything
so rigid.
disintegrates.
Yes,
Speaking from
and you're so
experience, everything
rigid.
disintegrates.
And that doesn't matter if you're 21 or 18 or 35 or 45 or 55. It doesn't matter.
No.
You've got to be less rigid in and more willing to accommodate somebody that you supposedly love and care for.
But let me also say to you, and maybe you don't want to hear this from your mom, but if you don't want to share a bite of food or share a hoodie with me, I'm not really interested with sharing my body with you. You know?
Yeah.
Because what am I going to get out of that?
You can buy a new hoodie. We can order another meal.
Well, you can buy other things too, but
I'm going to leave that one alone.
yeah.
So am I.
But I'm just saying,
You're not wrong.
I'm not wrong here. And if you're going to be that rigid and uptight about things, go somewhere
Fuck off.
else.
I
Yeah.
got you. But I think that you're right, Mom, but I think that it should extend beyond bodies, beyond physical beings. I don't want to share my emotions with you because you're going to shut them down. I don't want to share my thoughts with you because what if it's a silly thought? What if it's weird? What if it's thought provoking and you're not willing to think about any of that? I don't want to share all of me with you if you're not willing to give me a bite of your french fries.
Then when I ask, do you want something? Say, I'd love some french fries.
I 100% agree with you. I 100% agree with you. I think that women have created this mess for themselves in many ways. And I always relate it back to the word fine. And so when
Yes.
Yeah.
I speak to new people, I always tell them, I mean fine by the definition. I do not mean fine, but you're actually in trouble. Fine means I'm mad and you need to come and figure it out and suss it out by yourself. I mean, I am fine. I am not great. I am not bad. I am middle of the road. It could be better. It could be worse, but this is where I am. And I think that in many, many aspects, women have done this to ourselves. We
I
have
don't disagree with you.
created this mess of making other people, especially men who, like Cole said earlier, we speak different languages. We have made them try and translate and try and read our minds by lying, is what it essentially is, by not speaking truth. And I think that that does both sides a disservice. It irritates
We
the
have
shit out of me.
we have said this so often, how different things would be if the truth were spoken.
Do you
Yes,
remember
say
that
it out
scene in The
loud.
Notebook? What do you want?
What do you want?
Just tell me what
Tell
you
me
want.
what you want.
That's all we need.
Cole quoting The Notebook was not on my bingo card for this episode, but I'm here for it. Ryan Gosling would be so proud. That's so funny. So going back to kind of the physical side of it, do you think that this decline in sex is a symptom of something else going on? Or is it just because we're not connecting as humans the way that we have in the past?
Yes.
Yes.
I think it's both.
Yeah.
Think
All men are trash. All men are rapists. All men are bad. It's the patriarchy. Like, there's this sweeping wave of negativity towards masculinity. I think there's this misconception that all men are part of the patriarchy, when in general, it's been a very select group of men that formed the
Loud men,
patriarchy.
but yes.
Sure. And have many of us benefited from the patriarchy? Sure. Maybe we benefited a little bit more than you did, but that patriarchy was largely taking advantage of us as well.
That's also history. That's how history has worked. Somebody
Yep.
has always taken advantage of somebody else, whether it was
but
men or white men or women. There's always somebody who's trying for the upper hand to leverage it for themselves.
But here's where I think I see it affect us today, Cole, and that is if I speak about the patriarchy, which is a fact, there is a patriarchy, there has been a patriarchy, it has affected things. What I don't mean is that everyone, every male is a part of that. But I do think that I think y'all have been beat up so much about it that you naturally assume that if anyone says that, they think it's a reflection on you. And so what I'm saying is we hear things that aren't said. You know, if I'm
Well,
saying something about the patriarchy, I don't mean you because I know who you are.
yeah, but
But that
Mom,
goes
you
back
are
to
part of a
fine.
minority of people blaming the patriarchy.
Yeah, that goes back to the fine thing. If you're not saying it out loud, just like you just said, we're hearing things that aren't said, then say it. I'm talking about the patriarchy in general. I am not applying this to you specifically.
Most people who are talking about the
Also true.
patriarchy are applying it broadly.
Yes. And there are instances where that is warranted. Are all of
There
them?
is
No.
there is never a time where it is warranted to say, I am not entitled to an opinion because I am a white man. I still get to have an opinion. If you don't
I
I
like
agree
it,
agree.
with you.
tough.
I agree. But to say that the patriarchy doesn't exist or to say that the patriarchy isn't real, I don't think is is reasonable. But I think that that's the
Sure.
same about every single stereotype and generalization. Every single one of them doesn't
Yeah.
apply to a specific subset of those people. So let's go back a little bit and talk about why we feel like especially Gen Z is opting out. Why are they not having sex? Why are they not having relationships? Why are they not forming these bonds that have been so seemingly simple historically?
Well, because I don't think they really are all that simple. And this is going back to another thing that Scott Galloway talks about. You need to get out there and you need to fail. And I
Yes.
think that we have taught this generation that failure is unacceptable to such a degree that instead of going out and failing, they're getting AI chatbot girlfriends and boyfriends. Mom,
It's
you
easier.
and I saw a statistic a couple of weeks ago. It's what, like 71% of Gen Z has opted for having like a romantic relationship with an AI chatbot as opposed to another human being.
Yeah,
Or maybe not romantic, but like 71 to 72%, if I remember right, of Gen
I
Z
think so.
has gone to AI
A
chatbots for
friend.
companionship
Yeah.
Ugh.
I've
because it can't
and I was
reject
gonna
you.
say, I think it's exposure. I think we are underexposed to reality and real people and overexposed to social media and influencers and stuff there. So I think there's a duel there.
So I saw something, I'm trying to remember where I saw it, but it was fairly recent research that was talking about millennials specifically are the last generation who were raised by authoritarian parents. These are the rules. This is how you do it. This is what you need to do. No, that's not acceptable. We got a lot of, and this isn't trying to throw shade at our baby boomer parents. It's just pointing out what it was. The reason you did something was because I said so. There wasn't a why. We're not explaining all of this. These are the rules that you live by. Get to stepping.
And
Mom
Callie,
grabbed us
sometimes
by
that's
the ears.
really valid.
I agree.
Yeah.
I'm not disagreeing with that at all.
Don't
But
touch the stove because it's hot
yeah,
is valid.
yes,
I don't need to explain that to you.
I agree. But it's talking about how this generation of millennials who saw and felt that way for whatever reason decided that they wanted to do things differently than their parents and went so far different. I mean, Mom, there are certainly things you've talked about it before. The way that you raised us, you wanted it to be different than your parents. But there was still form and function and boundaries. Because I said so was a reasonable response. If we weren't listening, you grabbed us by the ears and you would drag us to wherever you wanted us to be. And I'm not faulting you for any of that at all. I think that we are seeing, I'm really not, I'm not at all. I think that we are seeing a shift in how kids are coming up now, how Gen Z is coming up now, because they didn't have that more strict, firm, authoritarian parenting. And it
Gentle
is
parenting.
changing the gentle parenting, yes, is the proper term. It is changing the way that these kids see themselves and view themselves. And I think in some ways there's
And
some
behave.
benefit and behave. And I think
I,
that
I,
there's some detriment to it as well.
I think the lack of boundaries on a kid is a really big deal.
The lack of
Dangerous.
consequences is extremely dangerous.
I agree
Yes.
with you.
Yes.
And so if I'm going to sit down and explain to you, and don't get me wrong, Cole was that kid that did not want you to have to sit down and have a conversation with him. He hated that. That was worse than a spanking to him, was for us to have to sit down and talk to him about something that was going on. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying every once in a while, you just have to draw the line in the sand and say, don't go past it, kid.
Brought you into this world. I can take you out of it.
That's natural. There are going to be situations where I don't have time to explain this right now. You have to do what I say, or one or both of us is going to die.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's an
Because I said
extreme
so.
example, but like if you're talking about historically speaking, that has had a requirement to be an effective method of stop, stay perfectly still right where you are, because if you move, we're both going to die. I can explain this to you later, but right now you have to do what I say. Sometimes situations call for that. And again, that's an extreme example, but hey, don't touch the iron. It's hot. This is going to do harm to you if you don't listen to me. And right now I'm late for work and I don't really have time to explain this in great detail to you.
Yeah. It can go too far the other way also. I
Sure.
understand that. But we've got, like you said, Cal, this pendulum swing that doesn't stop kids from doing anything.
I
We just let them go.
There is I'm going to get in trouble for saying this. There is an inherent desire for perfectionism as millennials that is completely,
Counterproductive.
yes, counterproductive is a better word. Parenting, I suspect, I've never raised a kid. Parenting is hard.
Parenting is hard.
No one, no one on the face of the planet is perfect at being a parent. And I
But
think
Cal,
that
nobody's perfect at all.
the expectation for millennials inside of their own brains is that they can be.
Is that
I'm going to be
influencers?
perfect.
Is that the picture that they keep getting from social media? Or where is
I
that
think that
coming
weighs in
from?
on that.
I think
Yeah.
it's a result. I think it's more subliminal than
Mhm.
I'm perfect, so you should be too. I think it's more subliminal than that. I don't think it's a direct message, but I think that's just kind of what we, and not that I want to say this is a result. No, I do. This is a probably an unintended result of participation trophies.
Yes. Yes. You win every time, all the time, whether you won or lost.
Mm.
And you need to do this for your kids, and you need to make sure that they know that they're always winners. And going back to the Scott Galloway comments, we are not teaching them failure.
No, and
We have to teach
that's the
failure.
issue, is that because everyone got a participation trophy, no one ever felt like they failed. So they didn't learn
They don't know how
anything.
to get up.
So you could be
Yeah.
the
So
crappiest player on the team, but you still got a trophy. You didn't know you were the crappiest, or it was okay to be the crappiest person?
it was okay.
Yeah. It was
There
more
were
acceptable to be the
there
crappiest.
were there was only positive repercussions
Yeah.
for failure.
And there was no incentive to get better because you won
Yeah.
either way.
I started to say that really teaches you a lesson if you don't have to do anything.
Which
And
is what we're
that's to
seeing
me
right
what
now.
gentle parenting looks like. Oh, just let them do
Yeah.
whatever they want. And because I cannot use negative reinforcement, there's nothing I can do to correct this behavior. And then
Yeah.
you have, I'm going to stop that line of thinking there, but you have kids that don't understand what consequences are. And so they think they can just do whatever they want.
Mhm.
Well, and here's my perspective on that. If you let a 5-year-old just go wild and do whatever they want to, I can guarantee you that at 15 or even 12 for girls, they're going to be out of hand and you've lost the ability to really reel that in
Exactly.
and make corrections at that point.
Uh-huh. And then they come to you and say, hey, I don't ever want to have a boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife. I've got my AI chatbot. And there's no turning that back. They have no respect for you to listen to your advice, wisdom, knowledge at all.
Because you've never showed them anything.
Right. And I think that humility is a big part of this. I think that as a parent, it is your responsibility to say, crap, I sucked at that. I'm really sorry. I screwed that up for you. Because then they understand that you can come back from failure. It's okay to fail and you can come back from that.
In a lot of
That's how
cases,
we
it's
learn.
good to fail.
Yes.
It's required.
So let's shift a little bit. Let's go into these platonic co-parenting apps. Cole's going to get real feisty on this one. So, mom read an article here a little while back about all of these apps that have been, I mean, think of a dating app, a la Tinder or whatever it may be. But the goal of them is not to find a romantic partner. The goal of them is to find a co parent. I don't want a relationship with you out of this. I don't want a romantic relationship with you. I don't intend to live together or any of these things that come with. I'm not trying to have sex with you. I'm not holding you to these specific standards. I just want somebody to raise my children with platonically.
I want to have a kid. I don't have a romantic partner. Let's have a kid together. And
Find a
honestly,
romantic partner.
but what if you can't, boo? What
Then
if
you
you've
don't have a
spent
kid or have one
20
by your.
years looking for somebody and you can't?
That's not how we work biologically. Like, that's just not.
So
I am fascinated with this because from what I read, they are doing intensive interviews with each other and definitions of what they want and then coming together.
expectations and with
Yes.
lawyers.
Yes, contracts. And for that, I'm kind of impressed. I mean, Cole, even if I don't go to that's not how things are supposed to work, and then I
That's
am
what
going to
we
have to
need.
go to the other
More
side.
transactional relationships.
What if they work? What if they give people the desires of their heart?
Everybody
And
wins, right?
I mean,
I can
I
put bald tires on my car and it'll still roll.
So
I do question what happens to these children as they grow up and I mean, because there's lots of things that could happen there. Maybe eventually dad does find somebody as a romantic partner. Is this, y- you know, do you invalidate that contract and what does that kid feel? And
So let's talk about this a little bit before we get super into the details, because I know you guys are already well aware, but I want to be really, really firm in my assertions here. I already think most people that are having children are not qualified to have kids. If you are incapable of locating and confirming a romantic partner to have children with, what makes you think you're qualified? How are you going to be able to build that connection with your child?
I don't know that those come together. And here's my example. If you adopt a child, can you love that child?
Sure, you can.
Absolutely.
Can you have a child-parent relationship that is transactional? Does that kind of relationship work very well?
it didn't for Britney Spears or Lindsay Lohan or Amanda Bynes.
So how are you going to start a transactional relationship for the sake of having a child? You want a child as a status symbol, as a transaction. What kind of detriment are you going to cause to this child if that is how you think?
I don't think that that's the only option.
Sure, but I think it would be prevalent if this is what we are moving towards. I think it would be more detrimental than beneficial in the long run for more people.
And see, I think that there is a conscious decision there that I admire because they're literally putting down these are the things I want. These are the things that I believe in. These are the values I want to instill. And I want to continue to the next generation. And I see that as a benefit over some of the relationships that I've seen where it's all about lust or sex. I know that some of these can go wrong, but man, I'm kind of impressed with the thought that's going in on these.
The prep work.
Yeah.
And that's all well and good, but I'm not going to make some extreme analogy here because it seems ridiculous to me. But there are lots of things that people have done where the prep work was impressive and the outcome was abysmal.
And it may be.
So, I mean, we already know, factually speaking, that two-parent loving families produce more successful children, period.
That's correct.
Are there outliers that have single parents that are successful? Yes. But on average, two-parent loving relationships develop more well-rounded, more successful offspring.
That's because we don't have any kind of data on two-parent lovingly to the child relationships
Could be.
because they haven't historically existed. So just because it doesn't have data to back it up, I don't think makes it invalid. Let me say this. I would be so curious. I don't want to be the girlfriend, but I would be so curious to be a fly on the wall when some dude has to come to you and say, hey, by the way, I have a platonic child with somebody else and we're super cool. I guess it would be similar to if you were divorced, maybe. But by the way, there's another woman in my life that I parent with, but we didn't do it.
But even think about that. You think about all of the conflict that comes from a divorced family. I mean, this is somebody that you once loved enough to marry and have children with, and now you hate them enough to divorce them. But you don't have that, and most likely don't have that in this platonic relationship. It could be really game changing.
I don't think that's fair to say. What happens when you and I have a platonic child and I change my
Well,
political
that would
views and
be
now you hate
incest.
me? I'm not talking about you specifically. Gross.
I know. I understood what you meant, Boo.
People
So I was
change.
listening
Friendships change.
to a divorce attorney, an interview with a divorce attorney, like a big high dollar, multi-million dollar divorce attorney. And his divorces normally net him about, I want to say he said $3 to $5 million bucks. So these are big money situations, transactions. And he had all kinds of data on people who have a prenup in place tend to not get divorced. I'm not talking about celebrities. Kim and Kanye are not at all who I'm talking about. But people who take the time before they're upset to sit down and say, hey, in the instance that we don't like each other and we don't want to continue this relationship, this is how we are going to handle that. Don't have to exercise those prenups like at all. So I'm curious as to
Oh,
if that same,
rational people have great outcomes?
but
Weird.
that's what I'm talking
But
about
Cole,
here.
apply that to this paternal parenting.
Right. You've got
Rational
two
people.
rational people who are sitting down saying, this is what the plan is. This is how we're going to treat each other. This is how it's all going to work before anything comes up, before we have a kid that we are fighting over and frustrated. All of that is taking place before any kind of insemination, much less birth. And so these are those rational people. Do I think that there are going to be wackadoodles who come out of these situations? Of course, there's in every situation. But if they're doing all of that planning and prep work up front, saying, hey, this is what it looks like, this is what each of our expectations are for ourselves, for each other. Like we're talking about, you can have a successful relationship if you're not expecting the other person to read your mind. They're spelling it out. It's just no sex.
Yeah. I think something can appear rational, and to me this is not, even though it appears rational. So I'm going to disagree with you because I think you need that partner to partner love in order for that setup to be fully rational. To believe that I can have a transactional relationship with someone else and successfully raise a normal child is, to me, irrational, even though from the outside it may appear to be. I have a question for Mom, because I think that there is a structure that is proven to work when it comes to families. And I watched a guy talking to his son about this the other day. Do you think Dad loves you more than he loves us?
Yes.
Yes.
I think he has to.
I think it makes a better family if the parents love each other the most. And
If
it
they come
isn't to
first
say
in each
that I
other's world.
don't love you, but it's that relationship that again comes together and says, I'll lay down my life for you, or I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt because I love you. And it is a bond that holds you together. Because here's the deal. Here's where my brain is slowly going. If the mom decides that she has a favorite kid, and so I'm going to love you, Boo, more than I'm going to love Dad or Callie, then everything I do is going to be in reflection of you. And there is no way that I can do that without, in some way, not
Impacting everyone
giving.
else in the relationship.
Yes. Yes. And so I think that you kind of have to have that between the parents so that you can stand together and be united, because that kid's going to come at you sometimes. And so I think you have to have that united front.
That's kind of the point I'm trying to make here.
I know. I'm just saying kind of where Callie was going. I don't know if the sexual part is the part that
Is a
binds your dad and I
requirement.
together. Yeah. I just don't know that that's a requirement. And I hear what you're saying, and I can see that. I just don't know if that sexual love relationship is what really binds it, or is there something
It is a
different?
chemical
If
compound created in your brain developed by a sexual relationship.
I don't think that that's always true.
I'm not sure about that one, but let's segue a little bit and talk about the world when the country stops having babies. What happens then?
Yeah, zooming out of America, what happens when this trend, which as was mentioned at the top of the show, is taking place in far more places, far more countries than just ours. Japan in 2025, their number of births fell below 710,000. 17 years earlier, their government um, had projected that 710,000 was the most pessimistic projection. And their fertility rate hit 1.15 in 2024. Their prime minister has called this their biggest problem. They have committed over $23 billion over the course of 3 years to reverse this trend and have had minimal impact so far on reversing it. Then you've got China. In 2025, births fell to just under 8 million, 8 million, 7.92 million, which is barely 2/5 of what it was 9 years prior. That level of births in China is comparable to 1738, when their total population was roughly 150 million. Demographers are calling it a birth shock with a magnitude that is usually associated with famine or war.
We talked about the repercussions of that. I mean, if you go back to America and you just look at the financial part of that, you look at Social Security, and if that birth rate is so low, then, and I think originally Social Security was supposed to be, there were 5 people for every person, 5 people contributing to Social Security for every person who was going to be on Social Security. And now then that's like 1 in 3 people. And so you can't maintain that benefit if there's no one paying in. And so that's a financial repercussion for lots of people and at their most fragile time in their older, later years. So that's a really significant thing. But we talked too about even workers, that you don't have the workers to do the jobs that we need to just supply
Required.
the community with what they need. I'm wondering if there's a trend that we'll see that we're not even aware of at this point. I mean, if you have fewer workers, but then you use AI to replace those workers, I can see that kind of as a benefit, and that might even things off. It doesn't change Social Security contributions. So you still have that part of it. But
Shortage.
I'm just wondering, what are we going to see here? Is it all a bad thing, and will AI complement it in some ways to lessen the impact?
How? Does AI pay taxes?
No,
Do you
but
pay
that's
an
only
AI?
one. But that's only one aspect of it is Social Security. I mean, if you look at a housing shortage, but there's fewer people, then all of a sudden maybe you do have enough housing.
It's the interim that is the problem. It's the
Yeah, everybody has
transition
to
to this
make it
that's the problem.
through that.
Yeah.
So that
So
means
eventually,
your generation has the potential to basically starve because we don't have enough people paying into the system to take care of you.
And if we don't have enough money in the system, enough people in the system to pay into it to take care of you, what happens when we become that age?
And
Yeah.
we're having even fewer kids.
I mean, it's a really fascinating conundrum. What are the possibilities of happening? And do we have any ways of softening the blow as it comes over? Because I think y'all are absolutely right. This is a transition period.
And I
And
don't
it's
think it's
gonna
very far
suck.
off.
Yeah, it's gonna suck for the people that it really truly impacts in that transition. It's not
Yeah.
gonna kind of suck. It's not gonna kind of be hard. It is going to be absolutely devastating.
I mean, what's the current projection that Social Security will basically not have any leftover reserves by 2032? That's
2032.
6 years from now.
And even then, Mom, you as a worker who's paid in all of these years will get something like 70 to 80% of what you should be getting due to how many fewer people have paid into it.
I think it's lower than that. I think it's 67%. I mean, there's another factor here that I hadn't thought of, and that is you don't have siblings or you don't have cousins, fewer aunts and uncles. So the family unit becomes really minute. I mean, if you're talking about parents and one child,
I mean,
and that's all you've got, there's a difference there in how our entire society operates with each other.
but I think it's more than that too. You know, there's the old adage of two heads are better than one. When we start slimming down the population, we have less heads to put together to say, hey, how do we solve X problem? Hey, how do we get ourselves out of Y situation?
And do you think AI will play a role with that? That we don't need two heads anymore?
I
Oh.
mean, maybe.
I don't think that AI will play enough of a role in all of this to stave off the consequences for a huge swath of people globally.
I don't think it can progress fast enough.
Yes. And I think my big concern in this, and maybe this makes me really selfish, I think my big concern in all of this is that the people who are getting the short end of the stick is my generation.
Benefit is y'all are the most adaptable generation.
Because we've had to be, not by choice,
I know.
because it's
But
the only option.
what if you were my grandmother's generation who didn't know anything about making changes like that? I mean, at least your mindset is already there. You're not trying to catch up with that part of it too.
You're prepared for the suck.
I mean,
I mean,
sorta. Yeah. I mean, I understand your generation distrust of the future. That in a lot of ways, y'all have gotten the raw end of the stick.
Yeah, because we got sold this bill of goods, and then we graduated high school and they said all this stuff on the bill of goods, it won't be there by the time you're able to
Psych.
take advantage of it. Sorry.
oh, and you racked up exorbitant debt in the process trying to make it happen that you're stuck with. Best of luck.
I mean, this is, again, not far off. And it doesn't look like
No.
we're doing anything to solve it.
I think if there's anybody who can do anything to solve it, it is your generation.
Then your generation needs to get out of the way. Like, and I'm not trying
I
to
don't.
direct that at you.
No, I understand. I don't disagree with you. Let's do that.
How do we convince the rest of them that don't want to step out of the way, that don't recognize the need for that, or that recognize the need for it and don't care?
Doesn't
What's
impact
know
the
the
average
answer.
age of what's the,
73.
67, 70.
for sure it's 71.
I mean, honestly, Cole, that's the only answer that I have is that we stop voting incumbents in and we put new people with new ideas, younger people in there who can see, the scary stuff on the horizon and do something about it instead of just fighting partisanship, who will actually fight for
Again,
changes.
Mom, I think you're an outlier in your generation who can see that and is willing to say, yeah, I would vote for someone who's not that age. How do you get the rest of your generation to participate, to recognize, hey, we need to get out of the way so these kids can save themselves?
I don't know. Is there two before handy? Because it might take that.
Silence
Okay,
is not
Cole.
the answer, Mecca. I did just look it up. The average age of a U.S. Senator in the 119th Congress is 64.7 years old, according to
Oh,
the
look
Pew
at us.
Research
That's
Center.
better than we thought. Maybe some things are better than we thought.
There's no
Okay.
gasoline on the fire. It's just burning. Cool.
Who's got my weird thought?
I have a weird one for you today. Speaking of AI, and this is something that we have referenced in the past, is our lagging critical thinking ability. So, for my gamers out there, Unknown Worlds is a US based video game developer. They kind of big claim to fame is a title Subnautica, which is an underwater survival game. They have recently won a lawsuit against their publisher and parent company, Krafton, which is a South Korean video game publisher and developer. Krafton's CEO, C.H. Kim, aka the father of PUBG, for my Battle Royale players out there, fired the leadership of UW in an attempt to dodge a $250 million earnout tied to the successful launch of the highly anticipated sequel, Subnautica 2, amidst a scheme he hatched using ChatGPT. Both his legal department and ChatGPT informed him that even if he were to terminate the leadership of this kind of sub developer, Unknown Worlds, that Crafton would still be responsible to fulfill their end of the deal that he made with those developers to pay out $250 million if they hit their launch window in time. Those developers would still be entitled to an earnout. Regardless, he pushed forward with the creation of an internal task force dubbed Project X. This was all laid out for him by ChatGPT after ChatGPT warned him this isn't going to work. He still pushed forward and had it craft a plan that he followed most of the steps for. The mandate of this task force, Project X, was to either negotiate a deal on the earnout or execute a, quote, hostile takeover of Unknown Worlds. Kim, like I said, followed several other steps outlined by ChatGPT over the course of about a month, executing a communication strategy focused on fan trust, securing publishing rights to Subnautica 2, and preparing, quote, systematic material for legal defense. All of which came out recently in a Delaware court that has now ruled in favor of the founders and leadership of the sub-developer, mandating, one, that they all be reinstated, two, that $250 million earnout deal stands, and three, that Krafton extend the window for successful release to meet the criteria for that $250 million earnout to 2027 instead of this year, 2026, which is when Subnautica 2 is projected to launch.
So let me see if I have this right. He went to ChatGPT to say, hey, I want to screw these people that I made a deal with. And ChatGPT said, it's not going to
Not gonna
work.
Great
work.
idea.
So I'm assuming that this came to light, his chat. So I guess my big question is, do we need incognito ChatGPT when we're making
Yes.
plans to screw people?
That's exactly what we need, is we need to hide our lack of critical thinking. And this is my weird thought. Maybe it's not the AI that's diminishing our ability to critically think. Maybe it's just us.
That is a valid point.
So what is the expectation of AI in that instance? Like from you guys, your personal opinions, like is ChatGPT supposed to be like, no, I'm not going to help you with this. You're an idiot. This is a bad idea. No.
I don't know if you can program that in.
I don't know if you can. So weird.
That's funny, Cole. Yay, I'm glad that the creators got their time in court and that it
Fell in
sided
their
with them.
favor. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and people, don't try to screw people through ChatGPT.
Maybe just don't try to screw people.
Yeah, just don't try to screw people would be a great place
We
to
can
start.
go that way too.
Oh my
Okay,
gosh.
good
What's our
news?
good news?
So I have a good news story that is objectively ridiculous. And I mean that in the very best way possible. So I follow a girl online, a content creator named Elise. She runs an account called Hunters of Happiness. And she, this past week, 3 days ago, 2 days ago, Friday, so 2 days ago, threw a full blown wedding in her backyard for her dog. And the backstory is what makes it so adorable. So she has a golden retriever, Bo, who met his now bride, Paula, when her family moved into the neighborhood and they all became neighbors. They had one play date. Bo and Paula had one play date. And after that, these dogs were locked in on each other, fully committed. They would literally both escape their respective houses and run to the other's front door and bark until someone would let them in. They just wanted to play with each other. So fast forward several weeks ago, Bo and Paula had 9 puppies. And instead of just letting that be the story, their humans said, you know what we need to do? We need a wedding.
Oh
And
my gosh.
it was not a small wedding. They turned this into a full scale, over the top event that was honestly bigger than both of their actual family weddings of these two families combined. We're talking nearly 300 guests, people flying into Utah to come and attend this wedding. They had to hire security to keep wedding crashers out. Paula had a custom wedding dress made by David's Bridal. Bo was in a full tux. There was a DJ, a dance floor, multiple photographers, a videographer. There was a whole ceremony that was live streamed. The officiant, Bo's human dad, led them through their vow wows, which were adorable. They had a 2-tiered dog cake just for the couple and another separate cake for humans. The whole thing, like I said, was live streamed. And as of, again, this was about 48, not quite 48 hours ago. As of right before we started this podcast recording, they were almost 800,000 views on the live stream on TikTok alone. The puppies, the 9 puppies that Bo and Paula had, made multiple appearances at the wedding. There were full-on family photos, family of the bride, family of the groom, everybody all in one, all the kids, all the parents, all of the regular shenanigans of a wedding. They were totally and completely committed. But here's where it gets really cute and becomes good news. So because so many people online have become invested in Bo and Paula's love story, they wanted to send gifts, wedding gifts for the happy couple to be. And instead of accepting gifts for these dogs who are spoiled rotten and very well taken care of, the family said, hey, we want to have you donate to these dog shelters instead. So they had vetted dog shelters that several of the vendors for this wedding and donors to this wedding said, hey, we are going to match all contributions. They have raised tens of thousands of dollars for this over the top dog wedding that ended up helping real dogs in need. And that's why I love it.
Yeah, it's
Yes,
definitely
it
not
was
the 8.
absurd. Everyone involved knew how absurd it was and knew how ridiculous it was, but it also was a joyful, creative, community-driven event. And somehow in the middle of all of the chaos, it did genuine good for the dogs at these rescues. And I just think it's so cute. I will put a link to some of the videos because she has, like I said, she's a content creator. And so she has, what do you call that? Documented this whole process of preparing for the wedding and making things for the wedding. There was a full, like, you know, those like boards where you put your head through and there's something painted on the board and you get to be whatever's painted on the board. She painted one of Bo and Paula and you could put your faces in their place with all of the 9 puppies. It's adorable. She knows it's ridiculous. They all know that it's ridiculous, but it's also really cute. So I'll put some links in the show notes so you can go get a little bit of bright spot because it's really sweet. Whatever,
Love you
Cole.
guys.
Love y'all. Love you guys.